Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for another devotional. Before we dive in today, I want to encourage you to consider something. Would you please consider letting us know a prayer request that you have? Fellas, that's why we're here. We're here to minister to you. And so my hope today is that you would share a prayer request with us, whether it be small or large. Just get it off your heart. Let our men pray for you. And we have dozens and dozens and dozens of guys sitting around waiting to pray for guys just like you. So share with us that prayer request today on our prayer wall. I'm going to put a link below this video today and also in the email that you received. Just go there. Let us know. And let us love on you in a very spiritual way. So with that, let's dive into John chapter 10. I'm going to read verses 11 through 13. Jesus is speaking to the spiritual leaders still. Here's what he says now. He says, I am the good shepherd. So this is another I am statement from Jesus. He says this time, I am the good shepherd. And he's going to tell us what that means. All right. So he says, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. In other words, he comes between harm for the people of God. Now, he who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolves coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because, why? Well, he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. So guys, I want to do a couple of passes at this section because, well, there's so much really good stuff in it. What Jesus is explaining to us here is the difference between a good spiritual leader and a bad spiritual leader, which I think is vital information for the time that we live in today. So looking back on the previous story, remember Jesus described the spiritual leaders of Israel as thieves and robbers. But here he uses a new title, a new designation. He describes them as hired hands. And he adds in kind of a little bit of a contrast here so that we can see some new qualities that illuminate their deceptive and bad leadership. And remember, he's not having a conversation on the side with his disciples. He's actually saying these things right to the people that he's calling thieves and robbers and hired hands. So what bad qualities is Jesus touching on with this new title and designation? Well, guess what he tells us? There are at least 3 qualities referenced right here in this text. Jesus tells us first, they only see their role as a means of making money. Number 2, because money is their primary concern, they don't own the mission. 3, because they don't own the mission, they will passively allow the brutalization of the people of God when the pressure is on. And this reveals one thing, that they only care about themselves, unfortunately. So now if we compare the previous designation, thieves and robbers, with this one here, hired hand or hands, we see a subtle difference, don't we? We see 2 types of bad spiritual leaders. Those whose selfish intent is easily seen and those whose selfish intent is not so easily seen. Both end up brutalizing the people of God. They just do it in 2 different ways. So now let's get practical. How do we, as men of God, spot a genuine good spiritual leader, a real good shepherd? So let me give you some things to look for today. First, if your spiritual leader selflessly talks about Jesus as the good shepherd, and he talks about him a lot, that's a good sign. But I would be cautious if your spiritual leader talks more about their church and their pastors and their programs and their agenda than they do about Jesus Christ. Second, if your spiritual leader shows some level of transparency in his public addresses about his wayward heart and his desires and motivations, well, that's a good sign too. Because bad spiritual leaders are not in touch with their dark side, and they will suddenly abandon the mission and the people and leave a wake of devastation in their path. We've seen that a few times over the last decade, haven't we? Third, if your spiritual leader reads and studies and teaches scripture with absolute ownership of the mission of Jesus and selflessly cares for people, that's another very good sign. But if you sense he has his own mission or agenda that stems from kind of these selfish desires, then watch out. because nothing good happens when a man's mission conflicts with the commission of God. I love you guys. I pray maybe this has blessed you today. If it has, share it with someone else, and I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.